Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Joji.
So welcome back to the Deconstructed Woman podcast. Last time we talked about body image and the ways in which women view themselves, and specifically, how we feel physically impacts our perspective on ourselves and how we interact with others. And so we want to step further and talk about self-acceptance and what that means for us, different life phases and through different stages. And so Joji and I are going to kind of sit down today and talk about, what does self-acceptance mean to us? How did we maybe achieve that? Or are we still working towards that goal of go through our time here? So Joji, I know that we had started talking about kind of body acceptance and then moved into self-acceptance because it's a kind of a more global topic. But why don't you get us started with kind of what it means to you and what that's looked like?
Well, I don't know if everything in my life goes back to, aging and sort of as time passes, you are a lot more, I think, widely considering sort of like what are the priorities in your life and what are things rise to the top and things like that. But I tie self-acceptance to, I think, the passing of time. I think what was important to me in my 20s and what's important to me in my 50s are two very, very different things. I think as you have more life experience and, you've gone through, finding a partner, getting married, having children, like your priorities are constantly shifting. And as a result of that, some of the things that you might have been obsessed about in your 20s, like the way you look or things like that, really go to the bottom because you've got more pressing issues in your life, which is raising your children and not to be funny, but also to be realistic about keeping them alive and safe. And then, maybe as they grow up, you're thinking about, how do you find balance between work and life? And then at my age now, I'm thinking about, how can I stay healthy? And body image is not as important to me as being health conscious and being able to extend my longevity. Similar but different in certain ways. So I think it's a passing of time, really, for self-acceptance and what that means to me. But what do you think, Alyssa? Where are you at, and how do you define self-acceptance?
Yeah, I think it goes back to I think that I'm still finding my footing in the kind of person that I want to be. And I'm more focused right now in the kind of mother that I want to be. And so I think that that's, while that doesn't define me, because we've talked about, we wear many different hats. I think that I'm trying to find, like, what do I want to be, and what do I want to teach my children, and how do I want that to look? And then kind of expanding that out to, how do I want others to see me? And so it's a piece of it's more of finding who I am and who I want to be and what that looks like. I think that, like you were saying, I think it's changed over time, and there's definitely been changes for me with more focused on, maybe in my earlier years, how I looked and finding a partner. And then once I had kind of accomplished that, then kind of that next steps of ways that I wanted to present myself. And I'm now finding, like, I want to present myself in a way that really replicates and exudes my morals and the kind of person that I want to be. And so that's in my journey, if you will, is just really figuring out, what do I want to, what is the kind of person that I want to be.
Yeah. And I think that, I think when you become a parent, I think that really becomes a focus, because whoever your morals and values are things that you are consciously or unconsciously, handing over to your children. Right. And so I do think that, what is it you want to teach your kids, and what do you represent as being the right way to live your life and who to be, I think is very top of mind, I think, in the midst of parenting. Because I mean, I think those of us who take that seriously know that we're communicating that to our kids one way or the other. And I think that's a very important stage. And I think that that is one of the things you have to go to if you have children, to figure out, that's like the first um, check as to, okay, so what do I stand for? Who am I? And what am I passing on to my kids? I think that as that gets more solidified, then I think you move on to refining that. I will say, it just occurred to me as you were talking that one of the most important things I think probably in my late 30s and early 40s was really this one Buddhist reading statement that I read, and was by Anonymous, and I've never been able to really find it again. And it really spoke to where I was at that time in my life, more so than a lot of other things. And I'm not going to replicate it perfectly off the top of my head, but it was something about, when I give up what other people expect of me, I can I can find who I am meant to be. And that resonated with me so much, because I spent so much of the first part of my life trying to be what everybody else wanted me to be. I let them define who I am. And because of that, I felt like I was like so much further away from discovering who I was meant to be, or who I am supposed to be, or what path I'm supposed to travel, because I had so many voices in my head telling me what I was supposed to be. And when I've shed those voices, it has helped me really then start working on what is my authentic self supposed to be. And then that got me closer to self acceptance. I don't know if that makes any sense, but what do you think about that? Does that even make sense to the listener that I'm saying it out loud?
It makes sense to me, so I would I would assume it makes sense to other people as well. Because I mean, I think that really is what it's all about. We definitely, if we're kind of going through, the different stages again and phases of life, very early on, a lot, we when I talk about like teenagers and early adults, the focus is on peers and really trying to fit in and figure out the people that you surround yourself with, but like really just kind of creating this space for you to fit in with other people. And then I think as you get older, you move out of that and you kind of move into a phase where and so you move into these different phases where you have, again, as you get into maybe your early 20s or even early 30s, you're moving into trying to find who you are, but like kind of when you stop trying to be what other people want you to be. And I think that that's part of that development of your personality and your footing, because a lot of times I think a lot of people do focus so much on what other people want them to be, and then they get to kind of midlife and they're like, who am I don't know who I am, because I've been trying to please everybody for so long that I no longer have an identity. And we've talked about that with people transitioning, like having empty nesters, and all of a sudden to have this identity, and what that looks like, or you know how that influences you. I mean, that's the first one that comes to mind, but I think that happens in all phases of life. And for me, I'm realizing that I really don't want to I want to be authentic, and I think that accepting myself and being authentic is really the focus of where I'm at this point.
Yes, I do think, once, and we're constantly refining it. I mean, I don't think that, at my age now, that I will say that, I'm fully baked and I'm done. I've accepted myself and I'm done. I do believe that as I get closer to retirement, there's going to be sort of, a reimagining of what does that look like. Right now, to me, and for the last 10 years, I've always said I can't see myself retiring. I mean, I love working too much. I love interacting with people. Like, I think that retiring means giving something up, but that's particularly because my identity is so wrapped into my work, that retiring just seems like it's the next step before dying. Like, okay, then I'm like, which is so not true, you know. And so I do worry about, oh well, what is that going to look like? How do I reimagine myself so that I'm still interested? And I think that part of that is occurring to me now, is potentially going back to school and, getting that PhD that's on my bucket list. And so I've started having some new ideas about, oh, what would that look like for me? Because the bucket list is also becoming more important because I'm looking at what do I want to do and complete as I get to the end of my life. And not that I think I'm going to die anytime soon, but I want to make sure that I've lived my fullest life. Like I've done everything I want to do. And I really do believe that, I don't know if it's self-acceptance, but I've heard people say, like, I don't want to leave anything undone before I go. Like when I die, I want to be a shell of a person. I want to have exhausted all of me before I leave. And I sort of feel like that myself. And so self-acceptance also means doing everything I want to do, and not necessarily things like travel, but like what is my purpose in life. And I think that's the stage of life where I am now, is really looking at, okay, when I leave this earth, what is my legacy? What is the impact I've made on this earth? And I really do think that it has to do with connecting people to each other and helping people, just connect. And I've spent a lot of my life thinking about that. And I think that's something that, even though it seems so vague, it seems like that's my purpose. And so as a result of that, that helps me sort of like review, okay, what do I want to do? How do I spend my time? Because I think we're always challenged as women with, I only have this much time in a day. How do I make the most of it? Because this is what I'm meant to do. And so I don't know if that's a different topic than self-acceptance, but in my mind, that's where I went about that. So I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts about that in terms of self-acceptance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're talking a lot about our, like, kind of finding ourselves and letting go of the preconceived notions of what we should be, and I think that that's part of self acceptance. I think tracking it back to, kind of the previous conversation about body acceptance. I think that I think that self acceptance is, it's a mindset, and I think that it's also about, whether it's, you know let's resort back to like body image and physical attributes, whether you accept that this is the way that I am. I think that that was kind of a transition for me at some point, because I knew that I wasn't going to go back to, you know, maybe the physique that I had in high school. And that's part of just, realizing that a lot of things body and a lot of things have changed in how I do things. And so that, maybe that's not a realistic goal. And so trying to find what is my next goal, like what does that look like? And you had mentioned like being healthy. I think that's what I had said, is like that's always my focus is on being. I think there was also an acceptance of like, okay, I'm not going to, because I need to lose so much weight, I'm not likely going to get all the way down there, but maybe halfway down, or maybe, to a healthier weight, or where I feel good, or where my clothes fit better. And I think that kind of acceptance of, I think that's a healthy way of looking at it. I mean, I'm curious to hear what other people think as well, but it's also kind of acknowledging that, I'm going to have these stretch marks, and I'm going to have certain things about me that, some people say like that's a badge of honor. And so accepting that, like, I'm okay with this because this is how I look. And I think it comes out the most in the summer months, like when I go to the swimming pool with the kids, and I'm just like, oh God, like I have to put that swimsuit on. But then it's like, you know what? You can obviously see, like, I got all these kiddos with me, and I'm proud of that. And it's not something that I need to hide, behind a towel or a cover up. I'm just gonna kind of be me and be my authentic self, and not really focus so much on other people. So it's kind of melding those two ideas, about accepting who you are, but also accepting that it's okay if it's not perfect.
Yeah, and I'm definitely here to tell you that you'll have those stretch marks for life, because I have plenty of them, related to children and not related to children. But the one thing I was thinking about, Alyssa, is I got a little angry when I was here. I got really angry. Like, why is it that women spend all this time thinking about like all the barriers of self acceptance? Because I feel like, you know, the media influences our ability to be our authentic self, because they're telling you that after you have children, somehow or other, you're supposed to go back to this physique, or after you've had an illness, that you're going to go back to something that is this ideal. And women, we imprison ourselves with those things. And I don't know. I mean, do men, and I'm going to be really mean towards men. I mean, men who have a beer gut, are they sitting there thinking, "Oh God, I wish I was like in my 18-year-old body," or you know, I don't know. I don't have a lot of men in my life that sit there and ruminate about their bodies. I mean, it is what it is, and they just move forward. Whereas I think more women spend time looking at their bodies saying, "Oh, I don't like this and I don't like that." And so why is that? I mean, we know it. We've talked about it before. I mean, this is something we always get to about media and how, you know, um the images that women see and our children see of what self-acceptance looks like is something completely unrealistic. But why is it that, we are stuck there? Like, why are we not as able to say as men are, like, oh, they're just totally, that's not real? Like, why do we not have that automatic response and just move on? Like, why do we spend so much time thinking, because you are like every other woman, including myself, that the summer months and that 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 hated bathing suit, and what is the best cover up that I can use? It covers up most of my body. It gets into your 50s as well. I mean, it's something that I think about all the time. Not that I'm a huge swimmer, not that I have to wear a bathing suit often, but even if it's shorts, or you're thinking about, okay, well now, after 50, am I going to always wear like long khaki pants or capris? There are a lot of women in their 50s who never wear anything but capris. They gave up shorts because they don't like the way that parts of their legs look. And I just think, why do we hang on to that stuff? And why not look at our authentic self and work on just being like, you know what, this is who I am. As you get older, and for our younger listeners, I will tell you, your body is going to change. And you're going to have fat deposits in parts of your body that you can't control, and you're not going to be able to work them off easily. And so it is better to just go into your 30s and 40s saying, I'm going to have children. I'm going to have, my mom used to say, every she had three kids, and she didn't really have three roles, but she would say on her belly, she's like, well, there's you, there's your brother, and there's your other brother. And and we would laugh about it, but that's sort of a really fun way to think about it. Like, yeah, every kid you have, you're going to have something related to that. And it was a really healthy way of looking at it, without putting all this pressure on herself to want to be the size that she was, before she had any children. So I did get a little fired up about the fact that, women, and I mean, maybe there are men who feel that way too, and I'm sorry about that, in the sense of, I think, why do men have it so much easier? Because in my opinion, men do have it easier. But I don't know, maybe we should give the other side of that. I mean, Alyssa, do you think that men have the same kinds of opinions as we do, or do you feel like they're wildly different?
I think that, well, I mean, I have so much to say. I'm like over here nodding my head. Um, I mean, I was my first thought was like, this is why the beauty industry makes so much money. And, it's just that's how there's money to be made in trying to make women feel beautiful. But to answer your question, I mean, we talk a lot, or at least I hear a lot about like men having midlife crises. And I think that that might be related, but they don't generally focus on physical attributes. Maybe that's part of it, but it's like this midlife, like, I thought I'd be further along and that sort of thing. And so maybe it just manifests differently for men than women. I mean, that was my first thought on that piece of it. But I do think that there is this significant push for, I see so many celebrities who had babies and 3 weeks later, modeling or whatnot. We see, a lot of the older celebrities, they look great in their, 60s and 70s and 80s. And it's like, gosh, like they're holding this standard of like this, you could look like this. But there's also a lot that goes into that. And I think that that's something that we sometimes forget. And I remember I had read an article about, just parenting, celebrities parenting, and they were saying, when you see these photos of them doing things out with their families, remember that they might have 3 nannies with them. And I think maybe we had talked about that at some point in one of the other episodes as well. But it just like the idea of like what is realistic, what is real, and what is superficial or maybe made up by the society and industry and the media, piecing that apart. And I think that when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes me feel so much better, because I'm over here thinking, why can't I do everything? And it's like, well, because that's so pulling the wool off and saying, you know what, this is real life is hard, and real life, real people and how they look is going to be very different from what we are surrounded by. And I think that that does tag kind of circle back to self-acceptance of being able to say, It's okay. I'm fine the way that I am. I'm not perfect, but I'm where I need to be and I'm doing what I need to be doing. And that's the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I started laughing because your 3 nanny example made me remember a time when I had a 1.5-year-old, and we decided to go to celebrate our 5-year anniversary by going to Jamaica, and it was a really, really long flight. And as you and the listeners know, I only have one child, so I only had one opportunity to do this well. And I remember, I'm relative. We'd only been married for 5 years, and so like I have a 1.5-year-old, and we're traveling, and like it never occurred to me that I needed to pack like activities for my child. Like all of a sudden I found myself being that parent who had a child who could not sit still and was like wiggling and woggling and everything. And then very close to me there was a mom with 3 kids who had like every hour of the flight she had like an activity that she pulled out of this magic bag. And like I noticed that she had all these things, and I thought to myself, I must be like the worst mom in the world. Like, why didn't I know this? Why didn't I plan anything? And of course I was like beating myself up. And then all of a sudden I noticed that they invited my daughter to go over there, and then she like hung out with them within the confines of an airplane, and they shared like the things that back to me that I could share with my daughter, and we became like the best little buddies. And I called this mom the professional mom. Like she was somebody who knew what to do, and there was me looking and feeling so awkward, like everybody around me thinking, oh, this is a kid who's going to be like kicking the back of my chair because she's not able to contain herself. And I remember for a long time afterwards I just thought to myself, like, you got to get your act together. Like you need to know what you're doing when you're not at work. Like it doesn't matter if at work you have your act together, because when you're not at work you still have to like be organized and everything. And it took me many years to shed that and say, okay, I learned an important lesson. Like I will have activities in the future. But for that like first couple of years after that instance, I was just like feeling like I was the worst parent in the world because I didn't bring like dollar store activities with me on the plane. And it just now I can laugh about it. It's been a long time. It's been 20 some years, 25 years. But at that time I was just beating myself up like, what is wrong with you? And then I just realized, like, you don't know what you don't know. Like she was young, I was young, like I had no idea what to do. And you have to have more than one child to know, hey, you got to keep these kids entertained. I didn't know that. I was the entertainment, but not when you're in an enclosed space for 4 hours or something. But anyway, it did make me laugh. And it is an example of my self acceptance over the last 25 years, because that year I did not feel anywhere close to self acceptance. I just thought I was the worst parent in the world. And so we do have to have a sense of humor about it. And we have to say exactly that. I mean, when you're seeing celebrities with their kids, the photographers aren't interested in the nannies. They're interested in the celebrity with their children and capturing them looking haggard or, not having full makeup on. And the people who have full makeup on, those are not candid shots. I mean, those are pre-arranged shots and interviews that are being done. And how can we possibly hold ourselves to a standard that is so unrealistic? And so, yeah, thanks for that example because it made me laugh at myself a little bit. because I was sort of crazed at that point about trying to be, Mary Poppins and, an extraordinary employee and manager and perfect wife and a perfect cook. And it just was crazy time back then.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's like, now being a mother of three, like, that mother had that same experience that you did 3 or 4 years before then, because that's how you learn. You're like, oh, I didn't bring activities, I didn't bring the things because I didn't know, but now I do. And 3 kids later, you're like, oh, I got this. So a learning experience, like, that's a great example. And again, that translates to parts of our lives. Like, we don't know what, like you said, what we don't know. And so, really taking all of that and realizing that it's all learning experience. We're just kind of growing day by day, but also giving ourselves grace. And I think that's the biggest thing that I have really learned over maybe the last, I'm going to say, like, 3 years of, it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to give myself some grace, because that is a really big piece of things. Like, I have this funny, I think I have before, but I have this weird thing where when we leave the house to go on vacation, I feel like the house has to be perfect, because if something were to happen to us, somebody's going to walk into my house and be like, gosh, these guys were slobs. And so it's like such a significant thing to me. And my husband's like, it's okay. It's okay if the house is not perfect when we leave. And I had to let go of that. And it's such a small thing, but it was like, okay, it's okay if the house is not perfect, because it's lived in. And God forbid something happens to us, people are not going to be coming in here and judging us. Hopefully not. So, it's those little things that we hold on so strongly to, but eventually we learn that we can't do it all, that we have to really give ourselves grace and really find ourselves in the mix of things. So, Joji, I don't know if you have any last thoughts. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. But I wanted to make sure I didn't cut you off before we close this episode.
Nope, I think I'm all good. My brain is working, but it probably is saving it for another episode is probably best.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. We look forward to hearing from you about your experience with self-acceptance and what that's looked like. So please reach out to us at any of the ways that you can, whether it be via email, on Spotify for podcasters, or on our Facebook group, the Deconstructed Woman Podcast Group. We look forward to hearing from you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you liked this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions, or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.